Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Natalie, and this is Scientology Life After a Cult, where we talk about Scientology, cultiness, and other cults as well. I'm glad you all are here. Oh, we need to talk about a lot of things today, including my evening. Don't let me forget. Or my overnight, I should say. So, on today's Culty Recap, we're going to talk about how Scientology is targeting hospitals and people in hospitals, how the FLDS is being exposed by a very brave couple at growing up in polygamy. They are one of my new obsessions. The similarities between the cultiness from the FLDS and Scientology, let's be real. The similarities between all cults are there. It just blows my mind. We're going to take a look also at some disturbing survey results from the survey that Mona Fat Grammy did of former Scientologists. Lots to dive into today. I'm so glad you're all here. Aloha to you all. I got to tell you guys real quick. I had a really bizarre overnight. It was weird. Good morning, Sarah. Aloha, everybody. Throw those alohas in the chat. I love you guys. Thank you so much for bringing the aloha. So I went to bed extra early last night. I've been falling asleep extra early because this extreme cold weather is just like bumming me out. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm going to go to sleep. And when I wake up, maybe it will be warm enough to go outside. It has not been. I mean, we're getting warnings now here in Minnesota, like, don't leave your house. Just stay inside. Your skin will freeze in 10 minutes. It's minus 19, I think, is the air temperature right now. So I wake up in the middle of the night and because I fell asleep too early. And I'm like, okay, let's just put on some chill sleep music and let's just get myself back to sleep. And I'm laying there and I hear ba-boom, boom. I'm like, what the hell? I get up. I grab my phone, I turn on every light upstairs, just in case, because I figure if someone broke in, it would scare them away. I like dial 911, but don't hit send. I just go out I look around, nobody's here, nothing happened. I'm like, maybe the ice froze on top of the roof because that has happened and it made this loud sound. But it was unnerving in the middle of the night. My daughter was sleeping downstairs, Oliver was sleeping, nobody else was up. So I think to myself, I look around, I'm like, well, Natalie, everything looks fine. So it must have been the cold, something coming loose on the roof. It was just so loud. So I get back in bed. By now, it's later in the morning, but still way too early to be up. Even for me, half the time I'm up at like 4:30 these days. So maybe it was right around then, actually. But I thought, you know what? No, I was up earlier. I need to get a little bit more sleep. So I think I'm going to go back to sleep. So I'm laying there trying to get back to sleep. Alexa goes off. My Alexa, and this song that she decides to play is, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. By now I'm like, okay, who's messing with me? Am I being punked? I'm even thinking like, is it my Tony? Because he's so mischievous like that. So I get up again, I look around and I notice here in my office, in the studio, the closet is open and I have a plant in front of this thing. And so to push the door open, something heavy had to hit it from the inside. So I think, okay, obviously something fell. I pull everything away. I open the door and there's this heavy, heavy case. It's silver. And it's one of those you can open up like this, and then it's got like different compartments and stuff, and you can close it and you can lock it. This heavy thing fell from from in my closet where it was sturdily sat. The thing's been like this since Tony died, like 7 months. This thing fell off and pushed the closet door open. I don't know how it happened, but I do know this. You're not going to believe what was in it. What was in this case, because I'm like, wow, that's so weird. Everything that was happening to me in the middle of the night or very early morning hours. So I pulled it out because honestly, I couldn't remember what was in there. I had just put it in there with some other things. So I pull it out, I open it up, and it's all of my Tony's guitar stuff to fix his guitars. Picks, little dually dads and screwdrivers and all this stuff. It's super heavy. So at this point, I'm like, okay, boo, I see you. And I appreciate you making sure I was awake when all of this happened, and it didn't just scare me in the wee early morning hours. So, needless to say, it was a crazy overnight. I feel like I've already lived an entire day now that I'm sitting down. So, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to get on with my day. I'm going to take it as a blessing. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I guess if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. It was crazy. Then I go to get ready and I notice every window in my house has ice on the inside because it's crazy cold. Air temperature minus 19 right now. So just, there's that too. I'm going to catch up on your comments there, but I think most of you probably, I'm telling you, it wasn't like a spooky thing. That's what made me think like, oh, this definitely, if it was, a visit, it's somebody who's on my side for sure. Sarah says, yeah, my Tony was definitely a part of it. I know, Andrew, it was wild. It was wild, which is why, I feel like I have massive bags under my eyes this morning. It was crazy. Jamie, how did it get on the inside? It's the humidity in the house because I have a whole house humidifier. And it's something to do with when it gets so crazy cold outside with the humidity, it causes condensation and then it freezes on the window. Now, how do I fix that? I don't know because I don't even have the humidifier turned up that high. So after this, I need to do some Googling, but I am open to your suggestions. So if you know how to fix that, my cold weather friends, put it in the chat or send me an email, Natalie@lifeafteracult.com. It was crazy. So here I am. I got my lineup ready to go and get into a bunch of culty stuff with you guys. Yeah, Mary, it was crazy, but it was positive, I would say. And yes, I did. I saw someone's question. I did. If you're happy and after the first verse, I'm like, all right, here we go. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. And to be honest, I needed the laugh. So I appreciate it. Candace, yeah, it was my Tony trying to be funny. If you're happy and you know it. Exactly. And even though I'm working through the grief process, I'm still crying every day, but I still have a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And the best part of my day many times is being here with you guys in the morning and doing this recap and talking about all of the culty things. So I appreciate you all so much for being here. Let's get into some serious culty news, some not so serious. This one, a little serious. Stace Speria sent this. You guys know her. She's in the chat a lot. So we've been talking about how in London, Scientology has been like so extra with their advertisements. And side note, y'all, I don't know if you follow Apostate Alex, but Scientology is after him big time. And it makes sense now because Scientology has obviously launched some type of campaign in London. If you're in London, Scientology is coming for you. Well, look at this. We've been talking about the advertisements that have been in the London Tube, but this is in, what's it called? Piccadilly Circus. Watch this, y'all. Such a huge touristy area. Tons of tourists in this area, in this square there. So you've got these electronic billboards there. And tons, I would imagine, I don't even know how many people are probably walking by. Boom, there it is. I'm a Scientologist. Are you curious? Boom, really big too. You can see, look at that size as people walk by. Now, I don't know if anybody actually stops and checks out the QR code, but Scientology is really trying to bring it in London. And I think that is something to do why they are so after Apostate Alex right now. We're going to look at an article from his blog coming up about some more shenanigans that Scientology is up to out there, where they are targeting people in hospitals and kids. We're going to get to that. Now, if you are in the London area and you would like to make a complaint about those advertisements, being that they are a human trafficking cult, I'm going to link this down below right after this, along with all the videos, etc. But you can actually make a complaint. And Stace was kind enough to forward that information. I'm going to link it down below with the video. And if y'all are out there and you find that, I don't know, offensive and be like, we can't advertise junk food, but we can advertise a human trafficking cult. Powerless to paralysis. Those models look like AI. Truly. All right, now let's see. Let me catch up a little bit. Okay, we need to take a look at this story that I came across on X. Thank you, Susan Good Grandma. That's very kind of you to say, and I agree with you. My Tony is with you, within you now and always. Yes. And I feel that every day when I sit down with you guys too. I truly do. Oh, there's Alex now. Great share, Natalie. Scientology got in trouble with the ASA before and had one of their ads banned. Ooh, Alex with the T. I did not know that. Okay, good. So there's precedent. So good. All right. Again, going to share it down below as soon as we are done here. So let's look at what I came across on X here. This story. Listen to this. This is a Scientology true story. An acquaintance belongs to a brass group that was hired to play at their headquarters in Clearwater. Before they arrived, the quartet leader told them not to F around because these people don't have a sense of humor. Obviously, he knows Scientologists because let's be real, they really don't. They don't. That's one of the things Scientology tries to take from you, in addition to your money and your time, is your sense of humor. Before they arrived, the quartet leader told them, oh, wait, I read that part. Don't F around, right? Because they don't have a sense of humor. On arrival, they were welcomed by the church director, telling them that they were going to be part of a huge celebration that was going to be televised around the planet. The trumpet player raises his hand and asks, "You mean this planet?" I thought that was super funny. I mean, especially people not in Scientology. And I was also surprised to hear that they were bringing in outside musicians like that in Clearwater, because if it was something that was going to be, simulcast to a bunch of people, it has to be one of Scientology's big events like L. Ron Hubbard's birthday, Auditor's Day, New Year's. One of those. But I love that they're sharing it. I really do. Now, let's talk about this article from Apostate Alex and how Scientology volunteer ministers are targeting children in UK hospitals. This is something I think we really need to get the word out about when it comes to Scientology volunteer ministers trying to infiltrate hospitals to go give people touch assists and their nerve assists and basically recruit for Scientology. This is like, you think they would have learned their lesson, but no. Look at this. This is Scientology themselves, y'all, telling people, because I think that, Alex, you probably like grabbed this from social or something, right? It shows the hospitals they visited, and these numbers, I'm assuming, are people that they've interacted. So some time ago, we were even calling out Scientology for going to hospitals in California. What they were doing is they were sending out emails to volunteer ministers, some of them not even Scientologists, which is how I got a copy of the email, got leaked, but one of our favorite Scientology spies, Diane. And they were doing this, going into the hospitals and sending volunteer ministers private information about the patient. Oh, Joe's there in room blah, blah, blah. Here's everything wrong with him. He's unconscious, but go in and give him an assist. Girl, I was like, what? And along all of you with me when we talked about it. Well, it would seem Scientology is doing that in the UK. So Alex says this was sent by a subscriber who is still on the St. Hill magazine list. So this is Scientology themselves bragging about this, okay? So these are all the hospital visits, I guess they had 400 at one, 200 another. Maybe it's number of assists. I don't know. But volunteer ministers based at the Church of Scientology's UK headquarters near East Grinstead have been targeting children in hospitals across the country. Photos from the latest St. Hiller magazine shows. This really shows you how out of touch Scientology actually is, that they are bragging about this. They're not hiding it. They're not covering it up. Constance June, Diane, her channel is more fun than sitting at home. She goes to like Disney, does a lot of fun stuff, her and her husband, Jack. Yeah. Oh, okay. Alex says it's number of gifts that they gave to kids in each hospital. I'm tracking with you now. Can you tell I didn't read the article? Wow. Wow. That just seems even more disturbing. So there they are with all the gifts, going into hospitals and distributing all these gifts here. They say our St. Hill Lions group organized and led visits to hospitals during the holiday season to bring beautifully wrapped gifts to children for Christmas. Oh, I just can't. I cannot with these people. Cannot with these people. So I'm going to link this down below so you can read the whole thing there. And thank you, Alex, for sharing that. It's so disturbing. Hey, Scientology up north. Hey, Rika. Aloha, everybody popping on in. If y'all could do me a solid and head over to that like button and go click, click, that would be awesome. Yeah, Mary, Santa hats, right? Telling you. Nisa, do some of the hospitals know what they are doing, and do they say anything to them? Alex, have you heard anything like that? Do they say anything? I've not heard, but I tell you what, I'm keeping an eye on social media because somebody, one of these hospitals in the UK is going to be on social being like, whoa, Scientologists were here bringing all this stuff and being, culty. So I think it's something to definitely keep an eye on. Most definitely. Alex says, I didn't put in the article as I couldn't confirm it with a second source in time, but I've heard rumors the gift was a copy of The Way to Happiness. No surprise there. Oh, little girl, you're battling a very serious illness. Here is a moral guide. You would hope they would at least give them something that a child would value instead of The Way to Happiness. Paralyzed to Paralyzed, calling it out. Where'd they get the gifts? The Toys for Tots bin in the lobby? Woo! Shots fired. I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, let's be honest. All right, now let's look at, there is a new channel, or at least new to me, called Storyland. And they recently did a video with Danielle Chamberlain, who's a former Scientologist, where she shares her story. We are going to look at a clip, but this is on my highly recommend list because I thought the interview was fantastic. She shared a lot from the time as a child, growing up in Scientology, being in England, just tons and tons of stories. Tons and tons of stories. But let's just look at a clip from this. Check it out, y'all.
And I think there's a line between morality and being allowed to have your own beliefs, whereas there's coercion and brainwashing that stops you thinking for yourself and tells you this is exactly what you should believe and this is how it actually is. And if you stray from that, you will be punished.
The punishment part, which is very common in other cults as well. One thing that I think is in common with so many stories of former Scientologists, and let's be honest, even other cult members, is how heavy punishment was used, even on children. We've heard a lot about that in Scientology.
Whereas in a loving religion where there's freedom of speech, freedom of mind, freedom of thought, you're not afraid of that. And you have to be careful not to cross that border into the nasty side of it. Right. And I think there's a lot.
That is so true. And it is such a control mechanism. I really loved her sharing her story, the examples that she would use and her insight and looking back on things now with the perspective she has today. I thought was super insightful. So check that out. I think some of you, I'm not familiar with her story, so I got a lot out of watching it. Some of you, it sounds like, are familiar with her story. Constance June says, Danielle always gives great interviews. I thought it was fantastic. That's right, Cubana Chica. And you pay for your punishment. Yes, that's the thing. A public Scientologist, right, who gets in trouble in Scientology will be ordered to security checks and interrogations. They got to pay for it. They have to redo certain courses as their punishment. For one, you'd be like, I don't know, Scientology, you're using your own services as punishment. Do you not see the irony in that? But they do. And it doesn't stop there. Anytime you step out of line, it's punishment, punishment. L. Ron Hubbard said you have to apply more pressure on the person than their bank, their case, their body Satan, their reactive mind can to force them into compliance. It's really gross. But she shares a lot, including, I like what she had to say. She was talking kind of about like who leaves Scientology versus who doesn't leave. Like, what is the difference with people who leave and maybe those who might remain?
The Scientology rules book, where you forget about your own kind of good instinct and morality, and you just go, no, well, they say we have to do it this way, so let's forget anything I believe in from a human perspective, and let's follow these rules. I don't understand why you don't go, hang on, this doesn't ring true to me.
Yeah, and the people who do get that, who do think like that, are the people who leave. But there are people who won't. They steadfastly, totally believe and are brainwashed into believing that this is the way to make this planet a better place to live.
And so much of Scientology, and as I'm learning more about other cults, I think this is a common point too. It's the way we controlled ourselves with our own internal brainwashing. It wasn't always somebody sitting there in front of you being like, Natalie, you need to do blah, 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 or else. Natalie, blah, 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 or else. There was a lot of that in Scientology, especially the Sea organization. But much of it is we would do it ourselves, like, because we needed to keep each other's ethics in. There's just, we were indoctrinated to, it's like they implanted within us this overdeveloped sense of all these things are our responsibility from childhood. So you grow up not having the importance of childhood and growing and learning and living life that way, but it's more about how can you keep your own ethics in and live within the guidelines of Scientology to avoid punishment. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah, Kathy Scoggins, exactly. You brainwash yourself. And I think that's something that sometimes people might maybe forget, that internal brainwashing is what really keeps so many people trapped. And I like what she had to say about this.
That this is what we should do, no matter the consequences to oneself. No matter how much hardship you have to go through yourself, you have to follow the path, because ultimately mankind is who we have to save. And it doesn't matter what happens to you to get to that. And anything that does happen to you is your fault. What they call is pull it in. So anything that happens to you.
The Scientology.
That's right. If it happens to you and it was bad, you pulled it in. If it happens to Scientology and it was bad, it's because of a suppressive person. Hey, Dusty, good to see you there. VGI's greatest good for the greatest number, as long as it's your 3D. So 3D is the third dynamic in Scientology. That has to do with groups. So even though L. Ron Hubbard wrote like, oh, these different dynamics, one is no more important than the other. You got to make your decisions based off the greatest good for all of them. But here's the twist. And my former Scientology friends, I know y'all can back me up on this. The truth is, it's what's the greatest good for Scientology. So if it's damaging to you, damaging to your family, but works out for Scientology, that is what you should be doing. It's so twisted, and that is part of the mind control. Oh, I'm so glad I don't have to think that way anymore, or make decisions that way, or evaluate information that way, that I actually get to think about myself. That is one thing that the way I grew up, a lot of you are familiar with my story, growing up in Scientology, being on staff, being in the Sea organization, and I was married at such a young age. My entire adult life, I've been married with a partner or raising children, except for, of course, since my Tony passed. And this is the first time I've ever been in a place in my life where there really is just me to think about. Now, of course, I have my friends and I have my family, but no one's looking out for me but me. And in Scientology, I feel like, because sometimes rarely do I like to think about this, but sometimes, and I did this the other day, I was like, oh my God, what would my life be right now if I was still in Scientology? It was not a pleasant thought. It was not. And I felt overwhelmed overwhelming gratitude for being out of Scientology, and for every person that came before me that shared their story, that gave me the strength to walk away from Scientology, which is a big reason why I'm here today. And I have my channel to expose Scientology and other cults and share my story as well, and the stories of others, because I know how much that helped me. And I think it's going to help. Well, I know that it helps other people for sure. Even those of you never in Scientology, but all in on ending this cult, because we all have things that kind of like were messed up, trauma, whatever you want to call it, in our past. But how do we, start creating the life that you actually want to have? It's just really interesting to me how for me and my healing, for me, it's healing to be more selfish, if that makes any sense at all. And I've talked to therapists about this. They're like, it's not selfish to take care of yourself and put your needs first when it's that whole putting on your life jacket before helping somebody else thing. That was so not a part of my upbringing or in Scientology. And I know, because of those new tools that I've been learning since leaving the cult, it makes me better equipped to deal with like my life and even the grief process and everything that I'm going through. And I have at times chosen myself over somebody or something else. And it is amazing. Like, I didn't realize how hard that was for me, that's actually difficult to do, because I spent a lifetime, almost, 35 years in the cult, and years moving beyond that way of thinking, not doing that. And I got to tell y'all, it feels good. It feels good to think about me. And the professionals in my life all agree that actually is a good thing, that it's showing growth, and, because I should be doing that. Crazy what it takes to get to that point. Lovey Cat, aloha to you, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, Irina, good to see you. Yes, Scientology always goes, we make the able more able, only that you are never that one they are making more able, just telling you to contribute to the group. Well said, Irina, well said. That is exactly how it goes down. Completely. I agree with you totally. Okay, we got to talk a little bit about growing up in polygamy, because your girl has gone down the rabbit hole. I am so amazed with these two. I've been watching some of their content. Somebody sent me a link. I even reached out, like I emailed them early this morning when I was up, after all the shenanigans going on in my house. And I'm like, hey, I would love to interview one or both of you. It's called Growing Up in Polygamy. We're going to look at a few clips from when they were sharing a story. And we're going to talk about the similarities to Scientology. There were 3 FLDS boys who were missing for like 2 years, and they were found by law enforcement. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, the similarities. Like, I get it, because so many of you have told me, because since I've left Scientology, like I have watched certain things about other cults, but I haven't really gone deep on it. And I'm doing that now. That's why we're talking about it. But we got to talk about this. You guys got to see this. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? In a way, too, I don't know. It helps me feel a little bit more. I know normal's not the right word, but it happens there. It happens there. It happens there. Cults be culting. That's all I got to say about that. Cult be culting. It is what they do. And this was no different. So there's a couple that does Growing Up in Polygamy. Many of you are probably already familiar with them. They got a great channel. And so he grew up in the FLDS. And I have since learned that the FLDS is like, those are the people who are still practicing polygamy and all that. And then you have the LDS, which are like more the mainstream Mormons that don't practice polygamy, but some still consider a cult. So he was in the FLDS. She was in the LDS. He left. They got together. They were practicing LDS, and then they left that. So fascinating story. Yes, Sam and Melissa. That's right. Thank you, Nancy. Constance June says they did an interview with one of Warren Jeff's wives who had to escape. Oh, I need to find that. All right, let's take a look at a couple of these clips and this story that they're sharing.
If someone within the FLDS church that used to claim to believe in and follow Warren Jeffs, like I myself did at one point, if they decide that they no longer want to put up with the nonsense that is his current revelations and things that he is writing to his followers from his prison cell, and some of the things that are starting to get really, really complicated and scary, if they decide no more to that, then the church, believing Warren Jeffs specifically and his close followers, believing that everything that you own is because of the church and therefore belongs to the church, even your children.
Does that not sound familiar? With Scientology, there is such a sense of entitlement with Scientology when it comes to your life, your family, your children, your credit cards, your bank account, all kind of things they just want to be helping themselves to. Truly.
If you decide to leave and step away, in this case, a mother steps away from the church, those children are taken away from her, from the church, and put into different homes, hidden wherever throughout the country, trying to keep them from being able to return to their mother. And during this time that they're being hidden, they're being brainwashed, if you want to call it that. If someone within the
I mean, I guess I knew to a degree because I had seen some documentaries about kids who escape from the FLDS. And I think it's interesting too that it's similar in Scientology. I mean, you guys know my daughter Shelby's story. And when I got Shelby out of Clearwater, she didn't know she wasn't going back. I didn't call my daughter up and be like, hey, we're leaving Scientology, so get on the plane and come home. No. Why? Because they would have sent her anywhere. And I knew that she still was under the spell of the brainwashing and was not in a place yet to receive the truth about David Miscavige and Scientology. She would have gone along with it very likely, at least for a while. I don't think long-term, because my family's always been really tight, even in Scientology, and she would have missed her family, but it would have started there. They completely would have raked her over the coals on this. So very, very similar. Let's see, hold on. And now they talk here about how a lot of the FLDS kids, they don't recognize the danger that they're in because they're brainwashed and being told, oh, you know what, your parent who left, your mom who left, they're no good. I mean, in Scientology, they'd be a suppressive person, kind of like, you know, Tom Cruise's kids with Nicole Kidman. And they move the kids around, like they'll send them to somebody's house and hide them. I mean, it's literal kidnapping. And Scientology will do that too. They will do that too. I just love that they're calling this stuff out. So let's take a look here. We got another clip here.
In the case of the FLDS children, something that's heartbreaking is they either don't realize and they don't want to be saved because they believe they're doing what God wants them to do. And so when police or law enforcement's looking for them, they're not reaching out for help and trying to find help. They're helping their captors, basically. They're helping, trying to stay hid because they don't want to go back, or they don't realize the opportunities because there is that brainwashing aspect of it, right?
Well, yeah, and they just don't know any better. They are kept in this bubble. I will speak for myself. I was very much set apart from the world and taken away from a lot of the things that you would hear and see living amongst, I guess, normal society.
And again, very similar in Scientology, when many children in Scientology are raised to be with other Scientologists. And that, you know, that by itself, a lot of religions, you know, seem to be that way. You might go to a Catholic school, but we're talking about a human trafficking cult. And these techniques and these ways of controlling people are used to keep these kids brainwashing themselves. And I know because I went through something similar in Scientology. Candace says, Sam and Melissa said they wanted to deep dive into Scientology. I made a list with you on it to contact. Also said you should contact them, would be great. Awesome, because I I just emailed them this morning. I would love to be a part of that and sit down with them, just like I did with Jake from Alt Worldly, who's a former Jehovah's Witness. He was on the channel over the weekend. If you guys have not seen that interview, check it out. I could have talked to him for hours. Well, I did. I talked to him for 2 hours. There's so much in there, and he did such a good job of explaining the Jehovah's Witness and sharing his experience. Plus, he's got a great sense of humor too, which also sounds like the Jehovah's Witnesses are not down with. I wonder what it's like with the FLDS. I would imagine too, they're not exactly the funniest people in the world, or don't want people to be. I don't know. Irina says also Scientology will often send the parents off to work on the other side of the world away from their kids. Happened to many second and third generation kids in the cult of Scientology. I was incredibly lucky. That's true. Good point, Irina. That's exactly what happens in Scientology as well. Hey, pause for Andrea. Glad you're here and going back to the beginning. Yeah, Samantha, we need at least another part. We had so many questions. I'm actually going to reach out to him today and try and schedule that sooner than later, because me too, girl. Me too. I've been thinking about it, marinating in it, and I'm like, I have so many more questions. Nancy Couch says, you will be blown away by Sam's story. Happy yet heartbreaking. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. So they also shared how these FLDS kids are used for labor and child brides. Again, sound familiar?
Their mother is evil, and they're going to be taught how important it is for them not to ever go back to their mother.
Right. And some might even wonder, okay, why though? Why is the church determined to keep these kids away? Well, of course, the church would tell you, or at least Warren Jeffs and his close followers would tell you, well, it's their salvation on the line, right? That's what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, we're just trying to help these kids return to God. And it's our duty, since they were raised in the church, that we help them do that. But on the
And again, in Scientology, very similar. It's you think that, oh no, I'm helping these kids stay on the road to freedom because Scientology is the only chance they have to not end up at the implant station lifetime after lifetime. That is like the whole Scientology goal, I guess, that people have. So yeah, powerless to paralyzed. I agree. The guy has a golden voice. Absolutely. Whoops, let's get that going.
Other side of things, we have seen and heard from many, many people that have been involved in these types of situations, that the church is using these people for labor, child labor in a lot of cases. And then some of the young girls are being married off. We've heard the marriages are starting up again. And so that type of thing is another reason why it's so terrifying, that these mothers just aren't aware of what is going on in these children's lives.
Their mother is evil, and
it's so disturbing because it's so similar again. Let's your parents are evil. Basically in Scientology, anybody not down with what Scientology says is suddenly evil. Like that person is evil. Amber Vanessa, good to see you. Wasn't Heber raised in a polygamous home? I've heard that. So Heber, being Heber Jens, who was once the president of the Church of Scientology. You may have seen him on Phil Donahue. I think he did an interview with, what's his name? I can see him in my Geraldo Rivera. Back in the day when Scientology used to actually do media, I think the last major, David Miscavige did his one and only interview with Ted Koppel, I believe it was. But I think you're right. I've heard that. I haven't heard a lot of the backstory about Heber being raised in polygamy. Do you know, Amber, has he ever shared or talked about that anywhere? I find that very curious, to go from the FLDS to Scientology. Gosh, I'd love to hear more about that. I really would. Dr. MLS, I love your interviews and interviewees. You are made for this. Great job. Thank you, Dr. MLS. That's so kind of you to say. I know I enjoy it, and I feel like it helps me a lot. Irina says, FLDS, they take the worst, most culty parts of LDS and make them even more radical and culty. It does seem that way. It does seem that way. She also says, if I can compare, imagine the LDS is the U.S. Navy and the FLDS is the Sea Org. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it does seem to be, I wonder, and I don't know about this yet, so you guys tell me, what do they think of each other? Like, do people in the LDS, like mainstream Mormonism, think the FLDS is just, do they think it's a cult? And what do the FLDS think about, the other Mormons that aren't practicing polygamy? I'm very curious about that, because that I've not seen yet. Yeah, Buttercup 49 says too, watched a lot of stuff about this cult. Yeah, there's a lot out there. That's right, Lisa Kelson. Someone did say Heber Gents was part of that. Ooh, Constance June says Heber's dad was mainstream LDS, but was excommunicated. Not sure what group his dad went to after that. Ooh, interesting. I wonder. Rachel says, I'm an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we do not approve of the FLDS. That's kind of, Rachel, I'm glad you said that. That helps me with context too. And that's kind of like what my understanding was of it, is this is something else over here. That is really interesting. And I guess I could see why a lot of Mormons would then feel that way about it. I mean, I'd want to distance myself. I like Irina's comparison there. That was a great analogy. Jersey Jan says, though he was never baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he identified himself as a believing Mormon. So that's Heber Jens. Interesting. Yeah, I had not heard that. Just a Northern Girl says, from what I understand, LDS cut out polygamy because they were getting pushback from the real world laws. FLDS doubled down. It does seem to be that way, like they split. And I kind of feel like the proof is in the pudding, right? The more control, the more culty type of behavior, the more abuse, maybe it's not a good thing. I look at my Scientology experience and it's all I ever knew. I felt like this frog who was being slowly boiled is all I knew. So it didn't seem weird to me. I didn't really have a lot to compare it to. And I wonder too, if it's probably the same way for kids growing up in that environment. They don't have anything to compare it to. And they're constantly being told and presented with information as fact and how they should be and what they should do and all of the control with fear and punishment. Totally makes it culty, completely culty. All right, speaking of massively culty, you guys. Oh, VGIs, yeah, they split like the Free Zone did, stick to the scripture. And for those that don't know, the Free Zone is a group of independent Scientologists, they're also called, who practice Scientology outside of Scientology itself. And Scientology hates them. They are squirrels, as they call them. All right, now we need to look at something. We've talked a few times on the channel over the last week that Mona Fat Grammy was putting together some statistics. There was a Google form. In fact, I filled it out live with you guys on a live stream for myself to look at the numbers. And these numbers can help law enforcement and other organizations understand the effects of Scientology and why it is a dangerous human trafficking cult. Well, Power Lies to Paralyze put the info together and explained it in a way that I think is very clear here. And we're going to take a look at that. I am going to link this down below. I think this information could be useful too to any of you that reach out to law enforcement or your government leaders or whoever to be like, this is what's up with Scientology. This is actually what's up. This is the effects of Scientology. So this is on Power Lies to Paralyze. These survey results taken from 100 ex-Scientologists illustrate a deeply troubling pattern of systematic abuse, neglect, and coercive control within Scientology, including the organization's treatment of children. When examined against societal standards and the legal framework of states like California and Florida, many of these reported practices would likely qualify as abuse, exploitation, and violations of civil and human rights. One thing I just want to say, well, obviously not just one thing, but I love, it's so helpful when people use the actual words, what it really means, because a lot of people who've left Scientology, especially if they grew up in it, don't recognize a lot of what happened as abuse because it's all you ever knew. So I appreciate that. A heartfelt appreciation goes out to Mona, aka Fat Grammy, for her dedication in organizing and presenting this important survey, shedding light on the experiences of those who have left Scientology. Her work plays a vital role in exposing the truth and advocating for accountability. Gratitude is also owed to the 100 brave participants who took the time to share their deeply personal experiences, helping to bring greater awareness to these critical issues. Below is an analysis of their survey's key findings and their implications in light of legal and social standards. That added part, I think, is so incredible and what is making this so powerful. 1, age of entry into Scientology. The fact that 75% of respondents were children at the time of entry into Scientology is critical because children are particularly vulnerable to exploitation and coercion. U.S. laws, including California Penal Code 273A, child endangerment, establish protections for minors, especially in cases involving psychological manipulation or exploitation. This statistic indicates that Scientology's practices disproportionately target children, raising questions about the legality and morality of these recruitment methods. So the second one here, auditing ethics and courses, 98% participation. Nearly universal participation in auditing, ethics programs, and courses shows the pervasiveness of these intrusive practices. Auditing conducted on the e-meter has been described as psychologically manipulative and, in many cases, involves sexually explicit and deeply personal questions, even for children. For minors, this will be classified as psychological abuse under California and Florida statutes. For adults, it can still constitute coercion and mental harm. It really puts it all in the correct box with the correct perspective. Relocation, listen to this one, 68% adults, 63% children. Relocating members to other states, especially children, raises serious concerns about forced mobility, isolation, and control. Such practices could potentially violate state laws on parental consent and custody when minors are involved, particularly if the relocation was coercive or lacked proper guardianship oversight. For adults, these relocations could be seen as means of isolating individuals from support systems, which is a hallmark of coercive control. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so common. This is considered outright normal in Scientology. I mean, think of all the people who were trafficked, my sister, from Hawaii to California to the international base and back. Here's a real disturbing one. Assignment to the Rehabilitation Project Force. And y'all know the Rehabilitation Project Force is Scientology's like prison camp in the Sea Organization, which they say no longer exists. The assignment of children, 57%, and adults, 44%, to the Rehabilitation Project Force, Scientology's harsh disciplinary program, constitutes severe abuse under any reasonable standard. The RPF often involves forced labor, sleep deprivation, and extreme psychological pressure. For children, this would be a violation of child labor laws and potentially falls under child abuse laws. For adults, it constitutes forced labor, which is illegal under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That was a statistic that blew my mind. Number 5, unaliving ideation or attempts. Now, this is particularly disturbing and sensitive subject. So if you need to step away, trigger warning there. 92%. All right, give me just a minute. I'm triggering myself. This is disturbing. 92% of adults 76% of children, 92% adults, 76% were children who had unaliving ideation or attempts who filled this out. The extremely high rates of unaliving thoughts or attempts reported by both adults and children are alarming. These figures strongly suggest that Scientology's practices create a toxic environment of psychological harm for children. This level of mental health deterioration could be classified as neglect or abuse under child welfare laws. Scientology's practices appear to exacerbate mental health crises rather than address them, which is especially harmful for minors who lack access to appropriate support systems. Now, we've known, I mean, you've heard many stories and firsthand accounts of individual people who've left Scientology and have had their own experiences with this. That number, though, completely caught me off guard, that there were actually that many. I mean, it really is staggering, 92%. And then the percentage with the kids just got me too. Like, this is so avoidable. And for me, it's a big part of what continues to motivate me to expose Scientology and other cults, because I think it's the only thing that we can really do about it. So tell me your thoughts too. I found that to be shocking. I don't know what I expected. I knew I expected it to be high. I didn't think it was going to be. It just feels like I mean, can't you just feel it? You just feel all of that pain and struggle for so many adults and children in Scientology, that they were so desperate, got to the point where this was the option. And for so many, they did it. And they are not here with us today. And I think that this is one of the biggest crimes in Scientology, is how individuals, including children, are driven to this point. And thank you guys for the aloha and your support in the chat. Keep it coming, because we're not done. I will be right back. I just need to blow my. Well, I guess we know my training routines from Scientology no longer work, because I can't keep it together and read something like that. It is just completely heartbreaking. So let's continue to look at this. The next one, disconnection from family. 52% of adults and 53% children. The policy of disconnection, which forces members to sever ties with non-Scientologist family members, is another form of psychological abuse. In the case of minors, this could violate state laws regarding guardianship and familial oversight. For adults, it constitutes emotional manipulation and isolation, a tactic often employed by high control groups. Exactly. They want you to disconnect, cut ties with anyone they don't feel is in good standing with them. or that supports them. If they're speaking out, people are speaking out against Scientology, of course, you are not able to speak out about them. You're not able to say anything about it. And so they're going to force you to disconnect. Thank you for the positive words in the chat, you guys. Keep it coming. And truly, like, whether you meditate, pray, positive thoughts, vibes, whatever, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm sorry, we got to go back to the previous one. If 92% of adults answered yes to this, how many people in Scientology right now feel that way? It's a disturbing number. It really is. It just is. Joining the Sea organization before age 18, 70% children. 70%. The Sea organization is known for its intense labor demands, lack of pay, and restrictive lifestyle. Enlisting children into the Sea organization before they reach adulthood is particularly troubling. Under U.S. law, minors are protected from exploitative labor practices, and the conditions of Sea organization life likely violate these standards. Furthermore, contracts signed by minors are not legally binding, raising questions about the legality of forcing children into lifelong commitments. And Diane, the survey came from Mona Fat Grammy, did a survey with a Google Doc where former Scientologists went on and answered the questions, and Powerless to Paralyze put this all together. And that line there, raising questions about the legality of forcing children into a lifelong commitment. I mean, we're talking about, almost everybody I know, not everybody, of course, but who was in the Sea Org did so as a minor. We were kids of different ages being forced into a life, not just a lifelong commitment, a billion years. Prohibition of reporting to authorities. So how many reported that, you know what, I was stopped from reporting things to authorities? 52% of adults and 57% children. The explicit directive to avoid reporting incidents to authorities is a clear attempt to obstruct justice, which is illegal under laws like California's Penal Code 148, obstruction of justice. For children, being instructed not to report abuse could be classified as an additional layer of coercion and endangerment. And we know this is exactly what Scientology does. You are not allowed to report it. If it involves another Scientologist, going to the authorities can get you declared a suppressive person. Lack of schooling. 93% of children. 93% of children, a lack of schooling. Denial of appropriate schooling for 93% of children constitutes educational neglect, which is a form of child abuse under California law. This practice not only robs children of their right to educate, but also perpetuates dependency on Scientology by ensuring they lack the knowledge or skills to leave. Exactly. That is so much in my mind too, why I felt like they really devalued education. Going to college was never on the table for me. It was just never a thing. Dropping out of high school at 15, because you can legally drop out at 16, was to go work for Scientology. That's right, Buttercup 49, kids cannot consent. And that's so right, because now you lack the knowledge or skills to leave. Like, where are you going to learn? Where are you going to learn how to have a bank account, how to get a driver's license, right? How to just function in the world, things that you take for granted when you've been exposed to that. But if you've never been exposed to it by growing up in the Sea organization, it does make it harder to leave. It makes it easier for Scientology or any cult to control those individuals by keeping them uneducated. And then you make kids afraid of psychiatrists at the same time and any legitimate mental health help. International relocation, 47% adults, 24% children. Moving children across international borders raises serious concerns about human trafficking and parental consent. For adults, international relocation can be used as a means of control and isolation. In both cases, these relocations are deeply coercive and may violate laws against human trafficking and child abduction. So there's some kind of overall implications here. Scientology's practices, as reflected in this survey, reveal systematic violations of legal and ethical standards, especially in the treatment of children. Many of these actions would qualify as criminal offenses, including 1, child abuse, auditing minors with intrusive questioning, subjecting them to RPF conditions, and depriving them of education meets legal definitions of abuse and neglect. Labor law violations. The use of child labor and coerced labor in the Sea Org likely violates federal and state labor laws. 3, human trafficking. Relocation across states and countries combined with forced labor could meet the criteria for human trafficking. Obstruction of justice. Prohibiting members from reporting abuse to authorities is a direct violation of the law. 5, psychological harm. The high rates of unaliving ideation indicate a harmful environment that fosters mental health crisis. Conclusion. The practice described in this survey indicates that Scientology systematically violates social, legal, and ethical norms with a particularly egregious impact on children. Based on these findings, significant legal investigation into Scientology operations would be warranted to protect current and former members and hold the organization accountable for its actions. You can find this on Paralyze to Paralyze, and it is a tool. I mean, use it any which way you can. Getting the word out. These are some pretty hard numbers. I fell behind in the chat. I'm going to catch up a little bit here. Linda Lou says, I'm both shocked and expected these numbers. It makes sense from their environment. It truly does. It's still, some of it I still found shocking. I don't know. I think sometimes in Scientology, in growing up in Scientology, and maybe it's the same in other cults, my former Scientology friends in the chat, you let me know. I often thought it was only me. It was only me. It's only me feeling this way. So obviously something's wrong with me. I need the interrogation. I need the sec check, whatever it is. And just this right here shows it wasn't only me. It's not only you. And if you're someone who's under the radar in Scientology and watching this right now, these are hard statistics. This is based on actual data, people sharing their experiences. It's very real, and you are not the only one, and you are not alone. And there's so much life to be had after a cult, which is what we like to share here as well. Let's see. How many people did the survey? 100. 100 people did the survey. James Steele, thank you for throwing in the joke. I appreciate that. Paralyzed to Paralyze says, and the children are terrified of the psychs, which destroys them as spiritual beings, so they don't report anything given the opportunity. Completely. Of course, they didn't want us speaking to school counselors if we went to public school. They put fear in us. I didn't grow up in the Sea Org. Now, I was in the Sea Org when I was 15, 16. On staff, but living with Sea Org members. And then I joined the Sea Org, I think when I was 16, almost 17, 16, because I got married at 17. So I would have been 16. It definitely does give you that idea. And you don't, when I was growing up, it was like, oh, stay away from the school counselor. Don't even doctors, you had to be careful about what you said, because a big fear that we had growing up is that the psychiatrist would take us and harm us. Like, that was the belief. And even when you leave Scientology, sometimes it can be hard for people to shed that and to have that trust in legitimate mental health professionals. Sometimes that can take longer. Sometimes I wonder if that's why it's harder to recover from Scientology than just about any other cult. We've talked to cult experts. I've shared this here. It could take an average of 12.5 years to recover from Scientology, and 3 to 4 times as long to do an intervention with a Scientologist than compared to somebody else in another cult. I remember Rick Allen Ross sharing that. Yep, Marcy, right now I'm sure it has to be frightening for the kids. Exactly. So you fill their heads with all this fear, they're never going to talk to someone. I can't tell a counselor at school what might be happening at home because they'll turn me over to the psychs. You spend your whole life growing up afraid of psychiatrists and counselors. It really is something. Just a Northern Girl says the states which have the largest population of Scientologists, like Florida and California, need to start policing this stuff. I agree. I agree completely. Absolutely. Amber says, honestly, I didn't learn how to drive until I was 40. I know, embarrassing. Girl, you don't need to be embarrassed about that. Amber grew up in Scientology in the Sea organization. And the cool thing is you did learn how to do it. You left that environment and you built a complete life for yourself and for your family. So you're rocking it, girl. You are rocking it. Keep it up. And I'm so glad that you're here with us too, and that you share more of your story with everybody, Amber. Truly. Truly. Ooh, thank you for the reminder, Mama Opal. Today at 2 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to sit down and do an interview with John Atack, who wrote A Piece of Blue Sky, and get all kinds of early L. Ron Hubbard stories and information there. I think it's going to be really enlightening. Professor Furberger, that's a great survey. Yeah, and again, props to Mona Fat Grammy for doing this, just getting that together. I spoke with her about it because initially I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Like, how do you, anyway, we had a whole conversation and she was so kind in listening to me and my concerns and talking me through it so I could wrap my head around what it would be and understanding what it was. And I am so thankful for that. She's just really got a great heart. Yep, Eric asked, fantastic job on this survey to all that worked on it. So that worked so hard on it. I agree. I agree completely. Mary Welling says, I got mine, driver's license, I'm assuming, at 42, lived in a town where you could ride your bike to most places. That's cool. I know people who weren't even in a cult that just got their driver's license later in life because maybe they lived in New York, in places where it just wasn't so common to have that. Scientology Crime says, I'm so appreciative of Power Lies to Paralyze to take the data and make it digestible. Well, and thank you so much for doing the survey and getting that done. Hey, Ginger, this is so true, and it has a major impact on recovery. Completely. Completely does. Tony Hoban says, this survey reflects what Natalie and other exes have discussed. It's so upsetting. So proud of Scientology Crimes and Power Lies to Paralyze. You guys are amazing. I agree. I think it's going to be helpful in multiple ways to be able to use this information. Joe Razin or Alien Dog. It just blows my mind that they've been getting away with this for decades. How can the government keep their eyes closed for so long? I don't know. Laying it out like this, though, I think is going to help because these are actual numbers, effects showing the implications. This isn't just some religion doing maybe a little weird religious things. No, this has major life-threatening implications for many people, as we saw by those numbers. That is a massive wake-up call. Irina says LA will never police anything until the feds force them to. Just my opinion. It's what we've been seeing. It's what we've been seeing. Oh, and thank you for the reminder too, Just a Northern Girl, to hit that like and subscribe. I see too, like even Irina, you didn't get your license till much later. You didn't need it in Moscow. That's right. I forgot that you spent time in Moscow too. Wow. That is a lot. That is a lot. I'm going to link everything down below. Again, 2:00 Central. I'm going to be talking to John Atack, the author of A Piece of Blue Sky. Today is Tuesday, which means we have a members only live stream at 4 p.m. Central. And I swear this time I will hit the right button. It will truly be members only. I did this last week and I did the settings wrong. And so many of you got a bonus of joining a members only live, but today I will hit the correct buttons. I made the mistake twice and I feel like it takes that many times and I go, okay, not going to do that again. Not going to do that again. So aloha, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you get to join me later. If not, catch it on the replay. If you've not already seen my video with Jake from Alt Worldly, who's a former Jehovah's Witness, go check that out as well. I love sitting down and doing those interviews. It's one of my favorite things, and I'm excited to be able to do it again today. Thank you guys for your support, your aloha and love in getting through what was something very difficult to read. I appreciate all of you for being here. Thank you so much. And most of all, I hope y'all get out and have an amazing cult-free day.